Israel and Iran exchange bloody missile attacks for a fourth day as casualties mount on both sides. Hello, I'm Mike Walter, sitting in for Anna Naidu, and this is The Heat. At the end of day 4, the fighting between Israel and Iran continues with no end in sight. A number of Iran's missiles have penetrated Israel's Iron Dome, inflicting casualties and severe damage in a number of cities. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says his government has set Iran's nuclear program back for a, quote, very, very long time, while Iran's president says his country has never sought or initiated war. CGTN's Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
As day 4 of the war between Israel and Iran is coming to an end, there is perhaps an indication from Tehran that Iran may be looking for the road outside of this conflict. Unconfirmed reports, we have to say no confirmation whatsoever, but these unconfirmed reports suggest that Iran turned to three of America's allies in the region, Oman, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, asking them to put pressure on the United States, for it to put pressure on Israel to head for a ceasefire. In return, Iran would be accepting much more flexibility when it comes to the nuclear talks with the Trump administration, something the Iranians did not do in the previous rounds of negotiations. No confirmation for this report, and as it seems, no acceptance at all on behalf of Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was asked on this issue on Monday evening, saying, "I'm not surprised that the Iranians are looking for a way out. Is this an indication that, at least for now, Israel is not willing to stop? Maybe so." Israel, of course, is targeting again and again all over Iran, especially in the capital, Tehran, being the symbolic city that it is. And yes, Israel is clearly succeeding, but the success comes with a heavy price, a very heavy price. Night after night, ballistic missiles coming from Iran are able to penetrate the Israeli missile defense system. They land, they make impact in various cities, and every morning Israelis wake up to the sight of destruction that these missiles inflict, to the news of more and more people being killed. And there's just a certain amount of time as to how much the Israeli public can stand this, can stand the closure that this country is going through at this time. So yes, Israelis are happy to see this military campaign, are happy to see that Israel is taking care of what is being seen as an existential threat to the state of Israel. But there's only a certain amount of time that the public here will give that credit to the government. Quite soon, the public here will ask to see a way out. So this demand, or perhaps offer coming from Iran, may be the beginning of the road to end this conflict. But at least for now, at this time, it's not happening yet. Jonathan Regev, CGTN, Tel Aviv.
There's a lot to talk about, so let's get right to our panel. Joel Rubin is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for House Affairs. Mohsen Milani is the Executive Director of the University of Florida Center for Strategic and Diplomatic Studies. His new book is Iran's Rise and Rivalry with the U.S. in the Middle East. Also with us is Barbara Slavin. She focuses on the Middle East and North Africa as a distinguished fellow with the Stimson Center, and Jamal Abdi is president of the National Iranian American Council. And Jamal, you were on the program with us on Friday. Things had just gotten started. Now we're 4 days in, 224 casualties in Iran. As we pointed out on our broadcast on Friday, military leaders, the focus of some of these attacks, as well as nuclear scientists. Can you talk to us about where things stand right now in Iran as far as this back and forth?
Well, what has happened since we last talked was there's been a broadening of the targeting inside of Iran. So energy infrastructure has been hit, civilians have died in increasing numbers. I think the number's around 400 now. So this has really spread beyond just military targets, beyond just nuclear targets. This is really starting to hit ordinary people pretty badly. And so I think inside of Iran, a lot of people, the Islamic Republic is not popular. And there was even a belief among some people that Israel striking Iran would actually liberate Iranians, and that the Israelis would only strike Islamic Republic sites. That unrealistic view of things, I think, has completely evaporated. People are starting to see that what happened in Gaza, what has happened throughout the region, is now coming to Iran. And so you've started to see this rally around the flag effect that I think really is blowback to Netanyahu's strategy. This operation is called Rising Lion. I think that is a clear wink towards the lion representing the monarchy in Iran, this notion of Iranians rising up to restore the monarchy. And what we're seeing instead is that Iranians are uniting and saying this is a foreign aggressor, and they do not have our best interests in mind. They're not going to liberate us.
You mentioned regular people. I know you know folks in Iran. What are they saying to you?
I mean, there's just a lot of fear, horror stories of, I know people who have been killed and who have been badly injured. And so the devastation and the destruction, I think, is, at least in Tehran, where the people that I've talked to are, it's becoming very prevalent. People saying, all I hear is bombs and, missiles going off all night. So it's this sense of being besieged by these attacks, and it's very pervasive now.
And Joel, obviously damage inflicted on Israel as well. They've been able to penetrate the Iron Dome. We've got civilians dying. A lot of cities hit. Trita Parsi, the co-founder of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, wrote that while Iran's missile barrages were fewer in number, they were notably more effective, saying that, he went on to write, Israel's air defenses are degraded. Tehran is likely to shift to missiles with larger warheads, increasing the scale of destruction. Do you agree with this point? And what do you make of this?
Yeah, no, look, first of all, to this question of the strikes, and also to Jamal's point about the civilian loss of life. It's a horrible tragedy when a civilian is killed in Iran, in Israel, and elsewhere in the region. And I think this just goes to the point that we have in Iran a government that is not paying attention to the civilians, has not been paying attention to the civilians in its advancement of its nuclear program. And there were many warnings that this could happen. And now the same in Israel. The Israeli people are not used to getting bombarded and used to getting hit. They, in fact, haven't been hit like this probably since the Gulf War back in 1991 with Scuds coming from Iraq. And there's a shelf life for how long they can take it. And to the question of missile defense, the Iron Dome was not meant for these kinds of missiles coming from Iran. They were meant more for what was coming from Gaza. It's coming from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. The THAAD is more appropriate for these types of hypersonic missiles. And it's true that they're getting through, and that is a big concern. I think for the Israeli people, many are going into bomb shelters. Thankfully, they have bomb shelters basically in every building in Israel. They don't in Iran, which is regrettable for the civilians there. And I think that we're going to likely see Israel now targeting more the missile batteries to deal with what Trita is pointing out, to go into those sites. And that, of course, then creates a dynamic where many civilian lives can get lost, because if missiles are shot from neighborhoods and from cities, then that's the targeting area, and that's what's going to be hit.
Jamal saying that people rallying around the flag, in a sense, in Iran. In Israel, this is a country that's war-weary. I mean, Gaza, you mentioned Hezbollah. What about, and he mentioned that in his report, Jonathan Regev, the public pressure at some point, hey, where do we go with this? How long is there a shelf life with that?
Look, Jonathan's right. Bibi Netanyahu is unpopular, generally speaking, as prime minister in Israel. But when it comes to dealing with Iran, that is a unifying policy. That is a unifying action in Israel, because they are deeply concerned about Iran's intentions towards the state. And why not? Around their borders, Hamas, Hezbollah, to the east, Hamas as well, the Houthis shooting missiles into Israel. So from an Israeli perspective, they're under continual bombardment from Iran. And so this war, if it can delay the nuclear program and reduce the missiles shot at Israel to a point where they cannot be a threat down the road, that does unify the people. But to this earlier point, this is not a permanent situation. There will be, over time and in short order, I believe, a weariness to continue this war.
Mohsen, let me ask you about Israel's stated goal, which is to ensure that Iran not develop nuclear weapons. But then Netanyahu also talking about possible regime change. Here's what he had to say to Fox, and I want to get your reaction on the other side. Let's listen.
Could certainly be the result because the Iran regime is very weak. I think it's basically left with two things. It's plans to have atomic bombs and ballistic missiles. That's basically what Iran has. They certainly don't have the people.
And this comes in the Prime Minister's comments after reports emerged that President Trump actually blocked an Israeli proposal to assassinate the supreme leader in Iran. What do you make of these reports? What do you make of this?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with your distinguished panelists. I think Israel's strategy toward Iran is evolving. It has started with the stated goal of preventing Iran from making a nuclear bomb. And it justified its war on Iran by going after Iran's nuclear facilities. But now they are beginning to expand the scope of the war, perhaps because, unlike what they thought, they haven't been able to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities completely. Fordow still is there. Now, what happens to it, I don't know, but it is the real price for this attack. Now, Mr. Netanyahu is trying to expand the scope of the war by talking about regime change in Iran. Well, two things about that regime change. One is that the minute most Americans hear about regime change, they're going to feel very uncomfortable. We've had two cases of unsuccessful, catastrophic regime changes in Afghanistan and in Iraq. American taxpayer spent over $2.6 trillion, and we now have the Taliban in Afghanistan, the very same regime that we sent troops to overthrow 20 years ago. And look at the mess in Iraq. So Americans are not going to be very comfortable when they hear the word regime change. Regime change that is imposed from outside is not going to work in Iran. Iran is not a country that was created by the Western colonial schemes. Iran has been around for over 3,000 years. It is a real country with a real culture, just like China is. And Iranians are not going to accept Mr. Netanyahu or Mr. Trump, or anyone for that matter, to impose their will on Iran. But the key element here, and I think one of your, since I cannot see who is speaking, I don't know who made that comment, but I want to make one point very clear. The Islamic Republic, I agree, is not popular in Iran. There is a significant portion of the Iranian population that opposes the Islamic Republic for the right reasons, for the mismanagement of the economy, for pervasive corruption, for repression, for all kinds of nasty things they have done. But it is one thing to oppose the Islamic Republic, and it is entirely another thing when your country, when your home, when the place where you're born is attacked. Therefore, my conclusion is that while there are many Iranians who oppose the Islamic Republic, but when their country, the country where they were born, their ancestors were born and buried, when that country is attacked, people usually rally behind the flag. Look at what is happening in Israel. I understand the Israelis. They're concerned, and therefore, despite the disagreement
Mohsen,
with Mr. Netanyahu,
we can get back to these points in just a moment. I do want to invite Barbara in. I know she's traveled to Iran extensively. I worked with her at USA Today. I can remember some of those trips. Your sense of what's happening there at this stage and how they're viewing this.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Mike, and with Mohsen and everyone else. We had a really good piece that we put up on the Middle East Perspective site at the Stimson Center today from a writer that I've known for a long time, writes for us anonymously from Iran. And this was a piece that he put together yesterday, just before he and his family left the city. And I think it captures the conflicting emotions of Iranians. I think they're, you know, Mohsen is right. They're furious at the Israelis for attacking them, but they're also extremely angry at their own government for espousing policies that have put Iran in this predicament. I mean, 46 years of chanting death to Israel is at the root of a lot of what is going on now. Iran's hostility toward Israel, its threats, its Holocaust denial, all of these things have played into the Israeli psyche, and it's why, as Joel said, Israelis, at least for now, are supporting their government's attacks. I mean, I've been on social media all day following the news, and there are so many people who think Iran is an existential threat to Israel, even though Israel has nuclear weapons, Israel has a second strike capability, and Iran does not have nuclear weapons. But this has been beaten into the heads of Israelis that they must fear Iran, and Iranian leaders are largely responsible for that fear. So I think there's a lot of conflict. Mostly now people are just terrified, exhausted, and want this to be over.
Joel, the Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Tom Friedman wrote on Friday, quote, President Trump has definitely used the Israeli attack to, in effect, say to the Iranians, I'm still ready to negotiate a peaceful end to your nuclear program, and you might want to get there fast because my friend Bibi is C-R-A-Z-Y. I'm waiting for your call. Some would say this is not a real effective way to get people to the bargaining table, but what do you make of Friedman's comments?
I think that President Trump is kind of riding the wave of other people's decisions, and he's maybe stumbled into some dumb luck a bit by balancing a right-wing, hawkish position in the Republican Party that he didn't have to take, but the Israelis did, versus an isolationist, no intervention part of the party where he can claim he is honoring that. The point for President Trump is going to come due, though. There is going to be a moment where he's going to have to decide, does he actually lead and step in diplomatically and leverage this military action by Israel to get Iran back to the table alongside our partners? And remember, these negotiations were the U.S. and Iran alone. That's ridiculous. We should be with our European allies and talking to the Russians and the Chinese as well, like we did in the past, to have a secure diplomatic agreement. Is he going to do that or not? Or is he going to go further, as was discussed by Jonathan, potentially engage militarily and attack Fordo, which of course could be disastrous on many levels? And I just don't think he wants to make a decision. And that, unfortunately, means the United States is sitting back and things are happening, and this is the result.
And Jamal, what about, you and I talked about this on Friday, in terms of effective way to get somebody on back to the table. The trust factor is always really important. Do you see Iran willing to go sit down for talks at this stage? I mean, there's this Wall Street Journal report saying that they are looking for an off-ramp. What's your sense?
It's very interesting how the Iranians have responded to this. There have been no targeting of U.S. bases. There have been maybe threats, but no realistic signaling of other escalatory moves that would draw in the U.S. And they are sending signals that they are open to negotiating. I'm surprised because the level of trust, the level of goodwill could not be any lower right now. And Iran was in the middle of negotiations in which Trump said his deadline had expired. Israel struck on the 61st day of his 60-day deadline for talks, even though there were more talks scheduled. Those 60 days of talks, the Trump administration really spent negotiating with itself. They entered those talks and did not have a clear bottom line. It finally became dismantle the nuclear program, the Netanyahu line, but that really wasn't put forward until the very end. And so I think for the Iranians, they see Donald Trump sort of, as Joel said, riding the wave and not really having a clear way that he wants to go. And so I think they are still kind of keeping their powder dry when it comes to the United States, in hopes that maybe this does end and there is a possibility to go back. I just don't think it resolves the central issue, which is dismantling the program.
Well, in JCPOA, I mean, we've had a lot of shows on the JCPOA over the years. I mean, and as Joel points out, there's a lot of people at the table. Is there anybody that can actually kind of push this in the right direction from your sense? Another country, perhaps?
Donald Trump can push it. Maybe another country can weigh in. Joel mentions the Europeans, who I think the Europeans have completely removed themselves from relevancy here. They have only criticized Iran for attacking while saying Israel has a right to defend itself, as if Iran doesn't. Vladimir Putin has said maybe he's going to try to get involved. I don't think the Iranians trust him, even if they are somewhat dependent on him. I really think this still comes down to Donald Trump, who is so mercurial. Nobody knows where he stands. And I think the Iranians are holding out hope that he actually does want a deal, and that deal doesn't involve Netanyahu's bottom line, but Trump's bottom line of no nuclear weapon.
And Joel, you look like you wanted to jump in.
Well, I think that Donald Trump's bought into the line of no enrichment for Iran, and there was a critical report that came out a week or so ago from the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, censuring essentially, or leading to the censure of Iran for the first time in 2 decades for bad behavior on the nuclear file, for hiding information, for not reporting accurately, for enriching at too high levels, too much quantity. And, we have a term here, they poked the bear. Iran poked the bear one too many times on the enrichment file, and they did not do this during the JCPOA negotiations. And at the JCPOA, when it was concluded, they had a low level of enrichment. It was monitored effectively. It was civilian purposed. That's not the case right now, and I think they've gone so far that President Trump has fully bought into the idea that they can't have any enrichment at all.
Mohsen, what do you see? I mean, the Iranian president recently talked about this conflict and, of course, Israel's ties to the United States. Let's listen to some of what he had to say, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Israel knows no boundaries. They intrude wherever they want with permission from America. We are by no means seeking to expand the war, but naturally, appropriate responses have been given so far. The more they try to escalate, naturally, the responses will become stronger and more severe. More innocent people may lose their lives.
Mohsen, how do you read his comments?
In 2 ways. Number one, I think it is important to remember that he, the president, is not in charge of formulating Iran's strategy, grand strategies, or military strategies. So that's a very important point. Ayatollah Khamenei, the supreme leader, is in charge of that. Secondly, it has always been the Iranian position. I don't know of any Iranian leader that does not share the view that Israel alone cannot act, that whatever Israel does, the United States is behind it. And therefore, what they see today is that Israel has attacked Iran with a more than a yellow light, perhaps with a green light, and perhaps with American support. And don't forget, America does not deny that they are supporting Israel in terms of its defensive capabilities. Yes, the offensive operations by Israel is by Israeli military and by Israeli jets. But when the Iranians try to retaliate or respond, then America comes to save Israel. The key issue here is that I believe this war must come to an end. Iran has to change its regional policies. I agree with Barbara 100%. She and I have talked about this. I have written about it. This policy of death to America, death to Israel, has finally brought death to Iran itself. It has come to an end. And I've been calling for ending this policy for a long time. So I hope that we can have a ceasefire. I hope Iran is allowed some time to recalibrate its policies. And I have to tell you, even if we agree on a nuclear deal, unless Iran doesn't change its regional policies, we're going to see this game, this play again and again and again. But I call for negotiations. I've always said Iran does not need to negotiate with the United States through mediation. Iran should go and talk to America directly. As a matter of fact, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't talk to President Trump directly.
Let me ask
you,
they don't listen. Barbara, you've covered Iran for a long, long time. What's the likelihood of that?
My concern is that the Israeli attacks are making that even more difficult. I mean, what a loss of face. But, the calls are coming. There was an open letter from a very prominent dissident, several prominent dissidents saying Iran should give up its uranium enrichment program. I don't know, possibly one compromise that could come from this. The Israelis have done so much damage to that enrichment program that maybe Iran could plausibly say it would be pausing uranium enrichment for a while, since it can't perhaps continue, and use that as a way to get into negotiations. But it's going to be difficult. I mean, Iran is acting like it's the aggrieved party here, even though it does bear responsibility because of its rhetoric and actions. And to get them to come to the table and make the necessary compromises will be extremely painful. It's kind of full circle, Mohsen. I mean, I'm thinking of the end of the Iran-Iraq War, you know, when Ayatollah Khomeini had to drink the poison, so-called, to accept a ceasefire. Now, will his successor, Ayatollah Khamenei, drink the poison? I don't know.
Jamal, your thoughts on that? Anybody willing to sit down and drink the poison, I guess the question.
Yeah. You know, the JCPOA was a diluted poison, I think. Just any compromise with the United States is hard to do. And I think when we talk about, you know, whether Iran is the aggrieved party or not, we do need to recognize it's a two-way street. You know, the invasion of Iraq was supposed to be followed by an invasion of Iran. The JCPOA was supposed to be bringing Iran back in from the dark. It was the United States that tore up that agreement. So I do hope that the policy changes, both for the people of Iran and for the region, but it is a two-way street, and the way that we were supposed to get there was through diplomacy to finally end these tensions that were keeping Iran in this revolutionary state, in this artificially, you know, the political economy is completely influenced by the sanctions and the outside threats. Once those are gone, things can change. Unfortunately, now we're in a war, and I agree with Barbara that this is going to make it even more difficult. I think the calls for actually building a nuclear weapon are far greater than they used to be because of these actions.
There's also, in the past, Iran has suggested they might shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and we're hearing lawmakers there. I mean, this could escalate even more, and obviously when you start talking about that, and that's the key gateway as far as oil. Kind of tease that out for me. Are you concerned about that? I mean, how far can this thing go?
I think if that was a step that Iran took, it would be a vast expansion. And I think Iran would make that calculation if they believed the United States was going to come in or the United States already came in. But at this point, I think Iran is being very careful in not inviting in other actors and keeping this as solely a conflict with Israel. Because if they choke off the Strait of Hormuz, that's, you know, global economy is impacted. Everybody is impacted. And that is really enlarging the war in a way that's not going to be beneficial for Iran.
It's like the nuclear option in a sense. I want to thank all of you for joining us. A great discussion. Really appreciate it. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Mike Walter in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for watching.